Let us come to order and go on the record. I am Commissioner Tanola D. Brown Bland, presiding commissioner for this hearing. With me this afternoon are Chair Charlotte A. Mitchell, Commissioners Daniel G. Clodfelter, Kimberly W. Duffley, Jeffrey A. Hughes, Floyd B. McKissick Jr., and Karen M. Cameray. I now call for hearing docket number W-218, sub 573, in the matter of application by Aqua North Carolina, Inc. for authority to adjust and increase rates for water and sewer utility service in all its service areas in North Carolina, and approval of a 3-year water and sewer investment plan. On June 30th, 2022, Aqua North Carolina, Inc., hereafter Aqua, the company or the applicant, filed an application seeking authority to adjust and increase its rates for providing water and sewer utility service in all of its North Carolina service areas, approval of a water and sewer investment plan, hereafter referred to as WSIP, which I pronounce WISP, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 62-133.1B and Commission Rule R117A, and authorization to modify certain terms and conditions for the provision of water and sewer utility service. Aqua proposes in its application new rates for a base year and 3 rate years included in its WISP. The proposed rate increase is based on a 12-month test period ending December 31st, 2021. Along with this application, Aqua filed the direct testimony of witnesses Shannon V. Becker, David Haddad, Dean R. Gerhardt, Dylan W. D'Ascendas, and John J. Spanos. On July 20th, 2022, Aqua made a Rule R1-17F supplemental compliance filing. On July 26, 2022, the Commission issued an order establishing a general rate case and suspending rates. And on September 8, 2022, the Commission issued an order scheduling hearing, establishing discovery guidelines, and requiring customer notice. Pursuant to that order, hearings for the purpose of taking public witness testimony were scheduled to be held in Raleigh, Wilmington, Gastonia, and virtually via WebEx. Each of those hearings was held as scheduled. The order further scheduled this hearing for the purpose of accepting expert witness testimony for today at this time and location in the Commission hearing room in Raleigh, North Carolina. On September 23rd, 2022, Aqua filed a certificate of service showing that customer notice had been provided. On October 24th, November 9th, and November 15th, 2022, Aqua filed reports on customer testimony received at the public hearings held in Raleigh, Wilmington, Gastonia, and the virtual hearing. On September 21, October 21, and November 18th, 2022, Aqua filed separate rate case updates with supporting data along with updated schedules. On December 2nd, the public staff filed the direct testimony of witnesses John R. Hinton, Lindsay Q. Darden, D. Michael Franklin, Evan M. Hauser, J. B. Lucas, Sashi M. Bata, and the joint testimony of witnesses Liam Fiesel, June Shu, and Michelle M. Boswell. On December 5th, 2022, the public staff also filed the joint testimony of witnesses Michelle Boswell, John R. Hinton, Kuei Fin Soon, Fin Zhang, and Charles M. Junis. Also, on December 5th, the public staff filed Darden Exhibits 8 through 12 regarding water and sewer investment plan rate years 1 through 3. On December 13th, 2022, the public staff filed supplemental joint testimony and corrected exhibits. On December 19th, 2022, Aqua filed the rebuttal testimony of witnesses Amanda A. Berger, Daniel T. Franceschi, Dylan W. D'Ascendas, Michael A. Melton, the joint rebuttal testimony of witnesses Joseph Pierce, Amanda Berger, Michael Melton, and Shannon Becker, and the joint rebuttal testimony of witnesses Shannon Becker, William Packer, Whitney Kellett, and Michael Melton. In addition, on December 20th, 2022, Aqua filed the joint rebuttal testimony of witnesses Gerhardt and Haddad. On January 4th, 2023, Aqua filed a request on behalf of Aqua and the public staff to excuse Aqua witness Spanos and public staff witnesses Chu and Soon from appearing at the hearing to receive expert witness testimony. On that same date, Aqua filed late filed Exhibit 1 to the joint rebuttal testimony of Gerhardt and Haddad. On January 5th, 2023, the Commission issued an order granting the parties' request to excuse witnesses from attending this hearing and to receive the excused witnesses' testimony and exhibits into evidence at the hearing. And that brings us to today. Pursuant to the North Carolina State Government Ethics Act, I remind members of the Commission of our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire at this time as to whether any commissioner has any known conflict of interest with respect to this docket. The record will reflect that no conflicts have been identified. And I will now call upon counsel for the parties to announce their appearance for the record, beginning with the applicant.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown-Bland, Chair Mitchell, Commissioner Clodfelter, Commissioner Duffley, McKissick, Hughes, and Kimmerite. Thank you all for your attention. We know we have a big week lined up, and we are here to proceed about it as efficiently as possible. I'd like to begin with some introductions. I'm Joanne Sanford of the Sanford Law Office representing Carolina Water Company. Representing Aqua. I might as well go ahead and get that out of the way.
That's your one for today.
At this point, you'll be glad I'm not a witness in this case. And with me at council table is David Drews of the Fox Rothschild Law Firm. I'd like to introduce some of the Aqua people who are here today so that you'll know who they are as they sit in the audience and then as they approach the stand. Starting with those here at council table, we have Shannon Becker, Aqua North Carolina State President, Kim Joyce, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, Mary Hopper, Regulatory Counsel, Robin Lambeth, Executive Administrative Assistant, and Emma Petty, Regulatory Policy Analyst. In the audience, we have Dean Gerhardt, Manager of Rates and Planning, Whitney Kellett, Senior Vice President of Business Transformation, Vice President of Regulatory Accounting, Bill Packer, North Carolina Manager of Engineering, Michael Melton, NC Director of Operations, Joe Pierce, NC Director of Compliance, Amanda Berger, Rate Design Expert, Dan Franceschi, Accounting Consultant, Dave Haddad, Dean Gerhardt, Manager of Rates and Planning, Heather Kiefer, Regional Communications Specialist, Chris Manning, Financial Analyst, and Charlie Baldwin, North Carolina Controller. Thank you for your indulgence in allowing me to introduce these people, some of whom are new to the hearing room for this case. Thank you.
All right. And for the public staff?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Megan Yost with the public staff representing the using and consuming public. Appearing with me this afternoon are Will Freeman and Rita Coxton.
All right, thank you. So before we get started, do the parties have any preliminary matters that need to be addressed?
We have a few housekeeping matters. I'll go first and then let the public staff correct and add to as they will. First of all, we have distributed, in an effort at efficiency here, we have distributed manila folders that contain the following. The commissioners, commission staff, court reporter, public staff counsel, and public staff should have Aqua's corrections to testimonies in one folder. These are all of the corrections that the witnesses have determined that we have thus far, and we think this will expedite proceedings as we introduce the testimony. We have also provided summaries of testimony for the witnesses that we believe will appear today. That's Mr. Becker, Mr. Haddad, and Mr. Franceschi. We will provide summaries at the beginning of each proceeding for that day. These folders should be on your desk. Are you finding them?
I think everybody found it except me.
Except you?
Yep.
Well, that's not good. We need some work to know. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Apologies, Commissioner Brown-Bland. Next, we appreciate the commission excusing the three witnesses for whom we asked, about whom we made that request, we and the public staff. I think we have already dealt with admission of their testimony, but if we have not, we'll be sure that we do that as we go. And finally, there was a change in the order of witness for this afternoon. We appreciate the public staff's agreement to that. And our sequence today will be, and the commission's acquiescence, our sequence today will be Mr. Becker, and then I think, as I indicated, Mr. Haddad, and then Mr. Franceschi. We think that's as far as we'll get today, but we have another plan if we go farther. So those are the first three. And with that, I think I have no other housekeeping matters.
All right, Ms. Yost, do you have a few items?
I do, just a few. First of all, the company has confirmed that Exhibits 3 and 4 to the public staff's joint testimony of Boswell, Hinton, Junis, Sun, and Zhang are not confidential. We have passed out summaries for the testimony of all of our witnesses. And then finally, the binders that were passed out, potential redirect and cross exhibits, are missing potential redirect exhibits 5 through 9 for the public staff's WISC panel. That's Junis, Boswell, Hinton, and Zhang. We had a lot of copyright issues, and those are on the way. But I will note that they're exactly the same, with the exception of the labels, as cross exhibits 5 through 9 for the Aqua panel of Becker, Packer, Kellett, and Melton.
All right. Thank you. And then I will say, as Ms. Yost reminded me, and I had communicated to you earlier, but for purposes of being here in the hearing room, if confidential exhibits are used or confidential information is being talked about in any kind of way, I'm going to rely on you to bring it to our attention and so that we can deal with it appropriately. So I thank you for that. If there's nothing else, we will get started with the case, and the case is with the applicant.
Thank you. I will call Shannon Becker as our first witness on direct. As Mr. Becker is approaching the stand, I wanted to announce to the commission and the public staff that though we have provided copies of summaries and we would like to ask that they be admitted into the record, we are going to waive the reading of our summaries for the direct witnesses. We would like to read those summaries when we get to rebuttal, but we're waiving them for direct.
All right. Mr. Becker, you see the Bible up there? Oh, there it is.
Yes, I have it.
All right, if you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Sanford.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Becker.
Good afternoon.
Would you state your name, business address, and occupation for the record, please?
My name is Shannon Becker. I'm the president for Aqua, North Carolina. The business address is 202 McKeenan Court in Cary, North Carolina, 27511. Was there one more on that?
Your title with the
My
company.
title, President of Aqua, North Carolina.
Thank you. Did you cause to be filed in this docket direct testimony consisting of 44 pages and 5 exhibits, one of which has 2 subparts?
I did.
Do you have any corrections to that testimony?
I do have 2 minor corrections.
Okay. If you would, Mr. Becker, tell us the pages on which your corrections.
The pages of the corrections are on page 4, lines 59 to 58, and then on page 24, lines 5 and 7, or 5 through 7.
4 and 24. Give me just a moment, please. Mr. Becker, we have distributed a folder that has the correction on page 4. Would you tell us again what lines those corrections are on?
I got the wrong line numbers initially. It's actually on line 16. 59 wastewater plants was the original. 59 should be changed to 58.
Okay. And to the public staff and to the commission, I will indicate that you should have in these folders this page that is taken from his testimony that redlines that change to which he just referred. Now, Mr. Becker, what was the other page that your correction?
The other page is 24 with the sentence starting on line 5.
I don't have that correction in my folder. So in case there are others in the same situation, would you please read into you do or don't?
We do not.
You do not. Would you please read aloud into the record, please, the nature of that correction?
Sure. The sentence starts, the company utilizes a modified version of this metric, dash, number of complaints multiplied by, in the place of by or in between by and the, it should be 100, and then dividing the number of connections, period, or dash. So you insert 100 and then dividing in between by and the on line 6. And then in line 7, you strike divided by 100.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Becker. Did you cause to be prepared a summary of your testimony?
I did.
And is it your understanding that this summary has been distributed to both to the commission and to the public staff and to the court reporter?
That is my understanding.
Do you have any changes to make to your summary?
I do not.
If I ask you the questions in your pre-filed testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Madam Chair, I ask that Mr. Becker's direct testimony be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand, as well as his summary as if given orally from the stand, and that his exhibits be marked for identification.
All right, there being no objection, that motion is allowed, and his exhibits will be marked and identified as they were when pre-filed.
Thank you. Mr. Becker is available for cross.
Good afternoon, Mr. Becker.
Good afternoon.
Does North Carolina General Statute 62-133(1)B entitle the company to recovery? Yes. Sure. Sorry about that. Let me start over. Does North Carolina General Statute 62-133.1B entitle the company to recovery of all costs it asserts that have been incurred since the last general rate case and projected for the next 3 years?
I think it refers to prudent costs and reasonable projections of costs and project estimates.
And beyond that, do you believe there are any other limitations on costs that can be recovered?
I believe all costs that are part of our cost of service used to serve our customers should be recovered if they are prudent and reasonable.
All right, I'd like to direct you to page 31 of your testimony. There you discuss the company's proposed system improvement plan, which is often referred to in the testimonies as SIP. Is that correct? Or SIP?
That is correct, yes.
And am I correct that part of the SIP involves transitioning from Lawson, that financial platform, to SAP?
It is.
Was the company utilizing Lawson leading up to and at the time of the sub 526 rate case?
It was used and is currently still used as a reference, but yes.
On page 35, line 16 of your direct testimony, you testify that the company complied with the requirements of the October 26, 2020 final order of the commission in docket sub 526. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And paragraph 11 of that final order required Aqua to conduct a review of its then current procedures and policies for determining when projects are complete in service and booked to plant in service, and file the company's findings within 90 days. Is that correct?
Subject to check.
Thank you. All right. And would you also agree that Aqua filed its findings pursuant to that order on January 25th, 2021?
Subject to check.
Okay, and would you also agree, subject to check, that the public staff filed a report on March 2nd, rather, 2021 in response to those findings?
Subject to check, yes.
And finally, on March 30th, 2021, do you agree, subject to check, that the commission issued an order authorizing Aqua to incorporate the accounting process to utilize the completed construction but not classified, or CNC functionality of power plan, among other things?
Subject to check, yes.
Do you agree that the unitization procedure that was approved by the commission has changed with the company's implementation of SAP?
I could not answer whether the specific procedure has changed. I believe it utilizes a monthly depreciation methodology now versus what we had previously, which was a semi-annual.
Is there a better witness to ask that question?
There would be a better witness to ask that question, the joint WISP panel, or rebuttal panel.
Thank you. Was the company in the process of transitioning to SAP in 2020 and 2021?
I don't exactly know the start date of when the transition started, but I know it was during 2021. If it went to 2020, I'm not positive exactly when it initiated.
And in connection with that transition, was the company preparing new accounting procedures?
There was an overhaul of a lot of processes and procedures, so I'm assuming that that was the case, but I was not part of those.
All right. Did the company provide any notice to the public staff or to the commission of changes in accounting procedures related to the transition to SAP?
First, I don't think there was a change in accounting procedures. Processes, I believe so. But as part of the SAP conversion, that was more of a process review, installation, and implementation.
Okay, and was the public staff or was the commission notified of those changes?
I do not know that answer.
Is there a better witness to ask that question of?
Possibly on the joint rebuttal panel, Whitney Kellett.
Thank you.
Although as far as the official notification, that would be something I'd have to look into. And I could follow up with the commission desires.
All right, I'd like to move on now to discuss the company's proposed customer assistance program, or CAP. On page 35, continuing through page 39 of your direct testimony, beginning on line 18 of page 35, you describe the company's proposed customer assistance program. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And I believe you testified that you performed a needs analysis based on the federal poverty level, utilizing county percentages extrapolated to Aqua's customer base. Is that right?
Our team did, yes.
And based on that information, you determined that 12% of Aqua's water customers and 11% of Aqua's wastewater customers, or over 12,000 customers, are either at or below the federal poverty level. Is that correct?
That's what the analysis showed, correct?
Would you agree that some of Aqua's customers receive both water and wastewater service?
They do.
So would you also agree then that there could be some overlap in the 12% water customer and 11% wastewater customer groups?
There could be.
And so would you also agree then that the actual percentage of customers that are at or below the federal poverty level would not necessarily be 11 for wastewater, 11% for wastewater customers and 12% for water customers?
I still think 11% of the sewer customers who fall under the category of the water customers that were determined to be at need would still be 11%. I'm not
Well,
following.
would you agree then that the total number of customers could be lower?
No. You have at least 10,000 customers, and if we're talking about redundant duplicate customers, at least 10,000 are water, and some of the 2,000 may be incremental to that 10,000, but at a minimum you have 10,000, so the number would not be lower. If I'm understanding that question correctly.
All right. You attempted to quantify the number of Aqua customers who are at or below the federal poverty level. Is that right? We just discussed that.
Yes.
However, the company is not actually proposing to use the federal poverty level as the eligibility threshold for the CAP program, right?
No, not strictly.
Right. So instead, you propose 150% of the federal poverty level could serve as the threshold. Is that
That's,
right?
well, I believe we mentioned that that's what the LIWAP uses, is 150%. Each of the eligible candidates, should this program be approved, would go through a review process, and the determination of their eligibility determined based on, I believe, the 100% number.
All right. Just a moment. So just to be clear, this is on page 37, beginning at line 12 of your testimony. Is it correct that it states such a grant could use 150% of the federal poverty level as the income guideline, similar to LIWAP?
Yes, it could. Yes, it does.
But you haven't quantified in your testimony how many customers would meet that threshold. Is that right?
We estimated how many at the 10,000 and the 2,200. That's how many would be eligible
Under the 150%?
under the 100%, under the,
Right. But you've proposed that 150% could be used. I don't see that number.
you're correct. And that's because the LIWAP also uses that as a recommended range.
Okay. All right. At this time, I'd like to direct your attention to what has been pre-marked Becker proposed cross-examination number 1, or cross-exhibit number 1, rather. So I believe you have the large binder there. It should be the first exhibit behind the Becker tab.
Behind the Becker?
Is there a tab that says Becker? It should be the very first document.
It's the very first page.
It's not the very first thing when you open
Oh, it's
It
the
should
first
say
page.
help. Yeah, I'm sorry. Helping hand. Do you see that?
So, yes, it didn't say Becker on it, so I wasn't
I'm
sure.
sorry. We had fancy tabs for not enough people, obviously. All right. So do you agree that this is a printout from Aqua, Pennsylvania's Helping Hand Low Income Assistance Program? And you'll see the URL for the website at the bottom.
I would agree, yes.
All right. And do you
All
agree?
right, let me go ahead and get this identified. So this, is this the document that has Helping Hand at the top?
That's correct.
All right, it will be identified as Becker Direct Public Staff Cross-Examination Exhibit 1.
Thank you. All right. And do you agree that on the first page there are bullet points? It lists 3 criteria that customers must meet to be eligible to participate in the program.
I see that, yes.
So that's household income is less than 200% of the federal poverty level, and then the 2 under that. All right. I'd like you now to turn to the second, which should be the second document in that binder. And we'd like to identify this as Becker Direct Proposed Cross Exhibit number 2. That is public staff.
We'll identify it as Becker Direct Public Staff Cross-Examination Exhibit 2.
All right. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Okay. And do you agree that this document is made up of the cover page and pages 21, or 20 rather, and 21 of the joint petition for approval of non-unanimous complete settlement among most parties and docket numbers A 2018-3006061, 62, and 63 before the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission?
I see the cover page, and I believe you referred to follow-up page 21. I have 24.
I'm sorry, that's correct. All right, so if you would turn to page 24. All right, do you agree that the numbered paragraph 109 indicates that Aqua America shareholders will contribute an additional $50,000 to hardship grant component of being developed rather for Aqua PA's Helping Hand program annually for 4 years?
I do, and I think that this is part of the settlement agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then the next sentence, the company agrees to evaluate whether to increase this contribution as part of its next base rate case. Do you agree that's what it says?
I do. I just want to make sure that it's understood that this was part of a settlement agreement, though.
All right. Am I correct that there's no indication in your direct testimony that Aqua shareholders will be contributing to the customer assistance program?
That is not the proposal at this time, yes.
Those are all my questions for Mr. Becker. Oh, I'm sorry, my colleague has one.
Mr. Becker, I'm Will Freeman. Thanks for talking with us today. If you'll look with me on page 9, line 19 of your testimony.
I'm sorry, you said page 9, line?
Page 9, line 19.
Yes, sir.
And there's a phrase you discuss that a WISP would, quote, reduce ROE dilution by helping address rate lag. See where I am?
Yes.
Please tell us what you mean by ROE dilution, and then please elaborate for me a little bit on this testimony.
ROE, return on equity, is I'm referring to the authorized ROE. In this case, in the last case, it was 9.4%. The dilution of that 9.4 is representative of the rate lag that would be had by investing capital or experiencing increased costs in O&M or carrying costs on that capital that are not included in that last rate case. And as you proceed through time, you get that inflationary impact, increase in cost impact, the increase in investments will actually dilute the return on equity.
Would equity be diluted if expenses rose faster than revenues?
Yes.
Okay. And so if we're in an environment where salaries, inflation are going up, and we're under the traditional rate making, not WSIP, there isn't a mechanism other than a rate case for addressing that, right?
For addressing the increased expenses?
Right. You can't just raise rates willy-nilly. You've got to come in for a rate case.
You're correct.
But this WSIP allows forecasts that rates can go up, right?
Based on reasonable projections of costs, yes.
And so that mechanism would help prevent the dilution of Aqua's earnings, correct?
Yes, comparative to a traditional rate case.
That mechanism in the WSIP would, compared to the traditional rate case, help prevent the dilution of Aqua's earnings.
It would help prevent that, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Does that complete the cross? It does. All right, redirect.
No questions.
All right. Commission has a few questions. He's getting ready. Um, Mr. Becker, regarding Aqua's proposed sewer use rule, could you explain how Aqua will try to identify specific customers who are responsible for harmful or toxic discharges?
So the sewer use rule is proposed in my direct, but we have a witness on rebuttal that is much more, he's the expert in that area that might be able to better answer that question.
All
It's Joe
right,
Pierce.
Mr. Pierce, that is.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And on the page 22 of your direct testimony, you explained about Aqua's proposing a wastewater compliance metric based on significant non-compliance rates that are developed by the EPA. Could you provide any more detail on the types of events that would constitute the significant non-compliance?
Again, if it's all right, that is an area where we have a specific joint panel on the performance-based metrics, and our expert witness there would be Amanda Berger, and would be able to better answer that question as well.
All right. In section G, pages 31 and 32 of your direct, that's where you discuss the system improvement plan.
Yes, I see it.
And just to be clear here, when did Aqua make the decision to implement SAP for the water sewer operations? Is that the
So
answer?
this would be another one that would be better answered by Whitney Kellett on our joint panel under rebuttal. But this is, whether it was been SAP or another ERP, we've been looking at this for several years. I do not know the exact start date of it, but we've been planning on going to an ERP system for quite some time.
And so you considered other ERP providers before SAP was selected?
I believe so.
You would still refer this to Mr. Kellett,
I would.
Witness Kellett? And do you know anything about the decision-making process there? Or would you also
I was not
refer?
privy to that. That was a
Okay.
corporate decision.
You mentioned the benefits of SAP are the ability to support a multi-company and multi-utility corporate framework and integration with other commercially available software. Can you help us understand these benefits and how they help Aqua's customers, Aqua North Carolina's customers?
Well, I know that this would be putting us all on one platform that is able to communicate more readily without customizing. But again, I think the very specific questions would be much more adept to be answered by Witness Kellett.
All right. And also, if I had a question about the testing and training that occurred surrounding all of this, also refer that to Witness Kellett.
That depends on what that, if it was local testing this past year, our operational level testing, I'm sorry, training that we've done, I could potentially comment on that.
Okay,
Otherwise,
so,
Witness
so
Kellett
you
would
had
know.
mentioned in your testimony that there had been significant testing and training before the end of 2021. Is that what you remember?
I do.
And that you began using the platform starting January of last year, 2022. Could you describe what's involved in significant testing and training?
I know that we had a dedicated team with outside consultants that were reviewing the processes and the integration changes that needed to happen, as well as, and then identifying what the processes were that were going to change and be modified at the operational, at the state level. So we had a lot of field and management team workers working with corporate to do testing of the processes and the new application. I do think Ms. Kellett would be able to answer that probably a little bit more in detail.
How were you present for any of this training
Did I personally accept any of the training? Yes.
or attend? And so can you answer, do you have knowledge of how many Aqua personnel were trained?
Well, at first we did rollouts of virtual training. This was also during COVID, so travel was tough. But we did extensive virtual training for all of our operators as well as our supervisors, area managers. We had some specialists who corporate relied on in our North Carolina state team, as well as several other states, to make sure that they understood the nuances of each of the states, which they vary. The requirements vary, the level of detail varies, how things are handled. So we did focus groups, we did virtual training, and then we also went back and did another rollout after to make sure that people understood what the expectations were, because when you receive all that training, it doesn't always stick right away of what's going to happen at a certain point in time down the road. You're not always going to remember that. So we did a follow-up training throughout this past year where corporate specialists came down, a group of folks, including Ms. Kellett, came down and retrained many of our folks to understand what the processes were, need to be, and to work through some of the issues and humps that were identified after we went live.
So in terms of the number, is this training needed and intended for the majority of the Aqua employees or specific groups, working groups, or?
It affected really everybody, but everybody in different ways. It depends on what the section was, what the area was. Accounting group obviously had an overhaul of their processes, the reports that were available, the information that was available. The review reports had to use a whole different level of information that had to be integrated to make it useful or similarly useful. Nothing was exactly the same. So we had to understand what those differences were. Operations had different levels of training because they have a work order system that they use. And the coding, a lot of the coding is now dependent on how they enter information into their systems. Timesheet tracking is very different now. It's integrated. So there were functionally different types of trainings depending on the user.
Is it fair to say it touched on most of your divisions or working groups?
I cannot think of anybody it did not touch.
All right, therefore all those, at least working groups, were represented in training activities.
In some way or another, yes.
So you touched upon this, but can you discuss or add anything more to the ongoing training efforts and the steps being taken to validate the accuracy of information that we now get from the software platform?
So a lot of the changes that have had to be implemented after the fact or after we went live were from user training, trying to accomplish a certain task, and either they weren't doing it right or they found out that they were running into a wall with how they thought they were supposed to move forward. So it was learning through the process and then elevating that to our corporate team to understand what the impact might have been to other states. So other states were also providing feedback into our corporate team to address those issues that might have an impact throughout other states and depending on the process. The actual training based on fixing each of those instances, I believe it was done kind of dedicated to the functional group that needed it. So I know like the accounting team with our CPR or our fixed asset tracking record personnel, if there were issues there, they were in direct contact with the SAP conversion team in corporate, working together very, very closely. Here's what the issue was. We'd have consultants on the phone working with our folks in our office to identify what these problems were and challenges were. And then once they figured out the fix, they'd roll it out and make sure everybody understood it.
So in terms of the pace of development and where we are today, do we is there need for ongoing validation to be sure that the data, the information being produced is accurate?
We've made significant progress, after we've started, we were identifying the bigger issues and then we were refining them, and we've been fixing these issues through all of last year. There's going to be continued refinements as we run into smaller or different nuances that maybe don't happen all the time. But I think the majority of the issues that are out there are identified and if not already fixed, being worked on to be fixed.
Any other specific processes or measures you can think of that the company has decided it needs to do in order to validate accuracy? Or is the process you already described, is that Just, that's what we have today and that's what's ongoing.
So my process, the process that I described is how I see it in North Carolina as what's coming through my state. But that would probably be a better question for Ms. Kellett, from a global perspective of understanding how are we rolling out those process improvements.
All right. All right, are there questions from the commission? Commissioner Duffield?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you could please turn to page 21. And you're answering a question, how does the company propose to measure, track, and evaluate operational compliance for water systems? And then on page 21, on line 6, you state in calendar year 2021, 5.1% of public water systems had one or more reported health-based violations. And is this percentage for all 3 types of public water systems as stated in footnote 2?
I believe that is the case. Amanda Berger, who's on another panel after me in rebuttal, would be able to validate that for sure, though.
Okay. And do you know what the percentage would be for just the community water systems?
I do not at this point in time. I can follow up if you'd like.
Yeah,
With the
yes,
response.
please. And then if you could turn to page 28. On line 19. You're talking about converting. And I was just wondering, you state here that if one connection or a connection is considered equivalent to 3 people, and then you talk about the outages per population, how did you arrive at this one connection equals 3 people? Is that a proper conversion?
It's a general conversion when we've assumed connections in the past, since I've been with Aqua, every connection represents approximately 3 people, and I don't have the statistic. But that's an estimate that we've used regularly since I've been with Aqua.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my last question or line of questions on pages 38 and 39. And it's in regard, or actually, if we could go back to page 37, it's with respect to the customer assistance program. Can you explain to me further how this customer assistant program will relate to the LIHWAP?
So the customer assistance program is something that I've been looking at for some time to figure out how do we develop this, roll it out, get approval for it, and what is impactful. The LIWAP or LIHWAP is, I think it's a temporarily funded mechanism that is for low-income housing and water and I'm not sure what the acronym exactly stands for, but I believe it's a temporary program. So we wanted to have something that was a little bit more long-term and representative of our customers that we could facilitate providing assistance to. And the recommendation in this program here is using Dollar Energy, and we use them in other states. And what I like about them is that they not only accept our applications for assistance from our customers who may need assistance, but if they do need assistance and they are proven to show that they need assistance, they represent other agencies who can also help with other things, whether it's food or rent or things like that. So they're kind of a one-stop shop that facilitates our need, but then they can also expand and offer the assistance to our customers that aren't necessarily directly facilitated by us.
Okay, and going back to, you said it's LIWAP.
Yes.
So is it providing the same services as LIWAP, but you were your intention is to start this program in case LIWAP ends, or will this provide additional services?
It's, I don't think it's one or the other. If you're eligible for LIWAP, our program would be separate from that, but our program would be administered for the long term. We do not know when LIWAP is going to lose its funding.
And why do you believe it will lose its funding?
It's a federal program,
Mhm.
but the federal monies are given to the states to administer. And right now, it's, it's subject to being funded continuously or annually.
Right. So, LIHEAP continues year after year. I was just wondering why you were thinking that LIWAP would end.
My understanding is it was created as part of the COVID, the assistance and need for part of COVID. I'm not aware that it's definitively going to end, and it may continue. But this was offering a way for us to provide additional assistance to our customers who need. We have been actually providing communications about LIWAP, but we would provide that communication to our customers and have it as an ongoing opportunity, and it's a pilot.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 39, you state that, the local agency would be paid $5 or $10 per application. How many applications would you expect to be processed?
I do not know that answer.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Commissioner Kleinfelder.
Couple of things. I want to go back first to the topic that you were discussing with Commissioner Brown Bland. Ms. Yost asked you a question on her examination. She asked you whether the company was using the Lawson platform at the time of the sub 526 general rate case, and your answer was yes, and it was used then, and it's still used as a reference, and that's got my attention. What did you mean? It's still being used as a reference.
Lawson is still an active application. We're no longer using it to record current transactional data, but we are maintaining all of our historic records there and are relying on it for historical purposes and tracking.
Only
To report.
only for historical purposes.
At this, yes, to
You-
report.
You're not, has no current functionality
It
for.
is not being supported.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Second topic, I'll ask you, since you're the MC for all the witnesses, and if you want to refer me, you can refer me, but you may know the answer. So one of the grounds for the current general rate case application is that the company's made some significant capital investments since the sub 526 rate case. And I looked through the list of those, and two caught my eye. One was the purchase of additional 250,000 gallons per day treatment capacity from Johnson County. And then there was a second 25,000 gallon per day purchase of capacity from Johnson County. And so I was mentally going back to the sub 497 case and trying to reconstruct the history of where we are. And so I went back and read back through the sub 497 case. And at that time, the company had bought 250,000 gallons per day treatment capacity from Johnson County for Flowers Plantation. And that was not put into rate base in that case because it wasn't at that point used. And the company had also paid $785,000 to Johnson County for a fee for transmission and distribution connection. And that was not put into rate base, but the company was allowed to recover over 6 years. I was trying to sort of put together a picture of the history with Johnson County. I mean, that is where your largest group of sewer customers is in Johnson County. And I was trying to get a sense of where we are with all the moving parts, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't construct it. So what I need to ask is who can help me sort of put the timeline together on the various back and forth transactions with Johnson County, and then a summary of where do we stand today? How much capacity have you acquired? How much have you sold back or released back? How much have you invested? What's already in rate base? What's been recovered? What's not been recovered? And what are you asking for to be put in a rate base in this case? I need that kind of summary, and I can't construct it on my own. Is there somebody who can do that for me?
If I try to do it here, I'd be close.
Well,
But I won't.
a late file exhibit would be perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to put that together for you.
Do you think you know what I'm looking for?
Absolutely.
Got it. Then that's all I have.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Becker, the answer to that question is you are the person?
I am
Is
the
that right?
face of that. Yes, I will put that together and I'll have my team work on that together. There's a lot of detail behind that with engineering operations and our compliance team. So we'll pull it together.
All right.
And I am the person.
As has been duly noted, you've been a good MC so far. Commissioner Hughes.
I think this is an MC question, but you can punt it if you have to. A lot of this new approach is focused on capital investment, multi-year, looking at assets. I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit to how Aqua North Carolina connects operation repair with existing assets. I know a lot of utilities have design software for asset management systems. I'm just curious of how you're doing that now, and will that change with SAP moving forward? So, if you're going out to one particular utility to do a lot of repairs, how are you tracking that now, and how will you be doing it moving forward?
Sure. So, excuse me, on the performance-based metric joint panel that we have coming up, Mr. Pierce and Mr. Melton, Director of Operations, and our state engineering manager, put that together. And right now it's very manual, or it has been manual, where we have information, we track the information. We've used various different reporting modules to identify breaks, records of breaks, water quality issues, customer service issues. And that's where we put the secondary water quality plan together using a focal point of what's the heat map? What do we need to do? Where are the problems? SAP is expected to streamline that process, help with additional reporting, additional information, will be available to us in a more reportable manner that allows us to identify and target what we need to do going forward. We're not there yet with SAP, but we will be. But as far as more details go, Mr. Melton and Mr. Pierce would be able to elaborate further.
Yeah, I think I'll save follow-up questions for them. So thanks. No further questions.
Question. Commissioner Cameron.
Good afternoon, Mr. Decker. I have two questions. The first one is related to your testimony on page 14 about the company's proposed banding range. And I think one of the disagreements between the company and the public staff is what the appropriate banding range should be. The company says 100 point margin, and the public staff says a 50-point margin. And in your testimony, you say that the 100-point margin is reasonable, and I can understand how it'd be reasonable for the company, but can you also explain why the 100-point margin would be reasonable to the customers as opposed to the 50-point margin?
The 100-point was something that we had identified and regularly talked about. It's first, based on our history, it's I would say the likelihood of us over-earning is not great. But the 100 basis points was just used as a reference point that we've been commonly talking about. Obviously, if it was a smaller, or whether it was 75 basis points or 100 basis points, the lower the basis point is, it reduces that upper margin. There's no impact below it, other than we can file another rate case, right? So a smaller range would allow us to file a rate case sooner, but I don't anticipate that we're going to be filing a rate case if we're within 50 basis points or 100 basis points anyway. So the margin is, I'm sorry, the smaller the margin, the more benefit there is to the consumer.
Okay. And then on page 17, about the performance-based metrics, you've noted correctly that the WSIP statute includes performance-based metrics to ensure that the utility continues to perform in a safe, reliable, and cost-effective manner, and that the rule allows the commission to authorize or order incentives or penalties for those metrics. And I think on page 18 of your testimony, you discussed that you believe that it's premature for the commission to order any incentives or penalties at this point. But what I'd like to hear from you is the company's position about if we are trying to incentivize the company to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective service, are we not missing an opportunity to further that goal if we don't have incentives or penalties that's included with this plan?
No, I think once you can define an acceptable performance-based metric that is has been vetted, whether it's based on trending or comparisons to best practices and industry averages, that's the purpose of having those incentives and penalties there, as long as they're balanced, right? Not just overweighted with penalties. But I do think that those incentives and penalties could be used, but we really have to make sure that the metrics are validated and are relevant and may not be duplicative of where we have other requirements on reporting from, if it's under a WISP, which that would be the obvious case, since that's what it's part of. If we have reporting on capital and O&M and all these other areas as part of our quarterly and annual reporting requirements, we don't need to be redundant. At least I wouldn't think we would want to be redundant with having those metrics that are maybe viewed and looked at on a very microcosm, not necessarily representative of our operations, be included as an incentive or a penalty before it has a foundation, a vetted foundation that it's relevant.
Okay. And that's helpful. Do you have an opinion about what that time period to validate the metrics, how long do you anticipate that might take?
Well, since this WISP period, this is the first one and it's 3 years, I would have no doubt by the end of this WISP period and in the next case, we would be able to determine whatever we decided to track, we would be able to assess whether or not those are relevant metrics that mean something to the commission and to the public staff and to our consumers and to the shareholders. Is it something that's relevant that we can use going forward?
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Mitchell?
Becker, I'm just going to follow up with you on the conversation you're having with Commissioner Kimmerite, because here's my question for you. I'll ask the same thing of the public staff when they put their witnesses up. The statute doesn't contemplate this work-in period or this period of time to determine what metrics are appropriate or not. It contemplates the multi-year rate plan plus performance-based mechanisms or metrics or PIMs or whatever you want to call them. Why didn't y'all get together and establish one that could be workable for this first time around? Because the way I understand what the company has proposed here is, let's get through this first multi-year rate plan and we'll test out some of these metrics, and then we'll come back to you with a PBM or a PIM or PBR or PIM in the next rate case. What if I don't read the statute the same way y'all do? What if I read the statute as requiring a PIM because you also get the multi-year rate plan? Help me understand sort of your understanding there and what happened. Why didn't the public staff and the company get together and come up with a workable metric or PIM for this first time through?
And my view was the performance-based metrics are a requirement of the WISP, in those 4 categories. So we tried to identify the most relevant, what we thought would be very relevant to the commission to monitor. And I say monitor because they have to be worked out. We don't always know what the nuances are of what's going to affect that. If we write it one way, and if you look at some of the recommendations from the public staff, if you write it one way, it can be interpreted differently.
But Mr. Becker, I'm going to stop you there because we regularly monitor the company's provision of service. I mean, these categories are categories of service quality and the company's performance of its obligations that we are on top of and that you all are routinely reporting to us on. So I still help me get to where you all are, because I'm still feeling at this point in time, having read all of the testimony, at least that has been pre-filed by both of the parties, that we need to be farther along in the process of having developed a PBR or a PIM or one of these mechanisms than we are.
I think we can identify metrics I think the challenge is identifying the range that, the guardrail range that determines whether there's a penalty or a penalty or an incentive. And we did not propose them because we were planning on saying, listen, what is the right norm? What is our trend? And we haven't been tracking all of these things. This would give us a chance to have consistency, not just with what we've done in the past, but how does that relate to what our other utility friends are doing, investor-owned utilities? What we're doing great at could be a penalty for us, yet it could be an incentive for them based on reaching different metrics. I was hoping that this would be more of an industry determined standard for some of these metrics, although we're very different, right? We're all the same, we're just a little different. We have well makeup, whether majority wastewater, small, large, packaged surface water plants. So I was hoping to be my personal opinion was I was hoping to be able to navigate and identify metrics that are relevant to us, but relied on best practices or AWWA standards that we could all agree upon. And it was a little bit aggressive. We got the legislation was passed last September, right? And we started putting together the rate case almost right away. And we did not get together with the public staff. That probably would have been a wise thing for us to do. We were focused on pulling together this rate case, which was a very big and different challenge, and we just did not do that. That was a missed opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you for the response, and I'll have the same question for public staff.
Commissioner Kleinfelter.
Mr. Becker, I have to do this. I have to follow really on the chair's question to you. Just strikes me as curious here. You're aware that one of your peer companies has also filed for a water and sewer improvement plan, rate plan. And they were before us recently, not that long ago. And we were having a similar dialogue with them about performance metrics. And came away with an understanding that they were in active discussions with public staff about seeing if they could come to agreement on some pertinent performance metrics for their initial multi-year rate plan. And in fact, they're to report back to us by mid-February on where they stand, and the rate case is still open, and we're going to hear more about whether they have achieved any progress with the public staff in their discussions. Have you had any similar discussions with the public staff about seeing if you could reach agreement on the performance metrics for this case?
We have not had any specific conversations with the public staff on that, no.
Other than the proposals you filed and that we have in the paper, have you made any other proposals or offers to the public staff?
With regards to performance metrics?
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
no, sir.
Other than what they've put on paper and put in the record that we have they made any overtures to you about seeing if they could come to some resolution on appropriate performance metrics of this case?
As far as I'm aware, there's been no real communication or dialogue regarding performance-based metrics since the rate case started.
Thank you.
Commissioner Deathley. All right. Seems like one commissioner took care. Commissioner Hughes?
I'll apologize, like my colleagues, but all this, you are probably appropriate for us to share our kind of general sentiments about this. And maybe you can help me with something that I kept scratching my head as I thought about this. You make a lot of case in your testimony for the financial benefits for Aqua of a multi-year, and talk about the dilution of the ROE. And then you make some references about reducing rate case expenses for customers. Are there other direct financial benefits for customers that we can point to with your multi-year rate plan that you can actually point to and say, our customers are going to be paying less sometime in the next 3 years because we have a multi-year rate plan other than the regular case expense? Is there an example of something that you're able to invest in the future that's going to reduce costs that maybe you wouldn't have done otherwise? Or, I'm trying to make it easier for you, but what, how do we say to the customers? I got the impression that the penalties and incentives were kind of an effort to try to lay that on, but without those, what can we point to customers?
So the primary benefit is the rate case reduction over time, right? If
The
we have rates-
expenses of the,
I'm sorry?
yeah, so the actual expenses of the,
The actual
Right.
expenses of the rates, and the better matching of our cost of service, we'll be hopefully likely to meet our authorized ROE, which allows us to continue to provide capital into the state and we've been providing, our capital investment's been about 3 times what our depreciation is. So it's been significant. So when we're looking at competing with other states for capital, that allows us then to spend that capital, identify that capital and utilize it and invest it as needed to address water quality issues, primary water quality issues, as well as just general infrastructure maintenance. The visibility, I think you were referring to financial, and that would probably be it for the financial. The visibility into the reporting, the annual reporting, the quarterly reporting that's part of a WISP is much increased. And absolutely is there, those penalties and incentives down the road will likely be beneficial, whether we can reduce O&M for a project or going out and getting additional grant monies. That will be beneficial down the road. I just think that the performance-based metrics need to be vetted. The guardrails need to be vetted before we install them and enact them.
okay, I appreciate that. So I did hear you got back to quality. I have no doubt that this might give you an opportunity to improve service quality, but we're hearing customers complain at our public hearings about both service quality and cost. So sort of a wait and see approach more than on the cost side. Is that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right, questions on commission's questions, starting with the public staff.
Yes, we do have a few. And I'd like to start with what was discussed at the end of the commission's questions regarding the performance-based metrics. So I believe you indicated in response to Chair Mitchell that the company didn't have sufficient time to work with the public staff on developing agreed upon performance-based metrics. And you indicated that you were busy filing your rate case. The company determines when the rate case is filed, is that correct?
Yes.
And so the company could have decided to push back their filing in order to attempt to work with the public staff.
We could, we did not.
All right. Okay, this is regarding the
And-
SA.
Excuse me, if I may, just to clarify, you said that we didn't have sufficient time. I didn't say we didn't have sufficient time. We just did not connect with the public staff to discuss the performance-based metrics.
All right. On the SAP conversion, could you provide an estimate of the number of hours that your accounting employees have undergone training for that conversion?
I do not know that.
All right. So some of that training happened prior to January 1, 2022. Is that correct?
It did.
Okay. And would you agree that despite the training that was done, there were problems caused by the conversion right off the bat in January 2022? And that was with respect to closing of blanket capital additions?
Yeah, that was the first month we went live, so there were issues. And I believe there were issues with the closing of blanket capital, yes.
Okay. And do you also agree that there were problems in June 2022 with the plant additions for non-blanket projects?
I don't have the exact calendar of whether it was blankets or non-blankets. I know we did a major fix in SAP in June that was rolled out in June. I believe was in time for the June close.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was for blankets or non-blankets though.
And just to be clear, the company filed its application for a rate case June 30th of
Correct.
2022. And would you agree that the company could have pushed back that filing when it discovered these issues?
We had already pushed back the filing. We were planning on filing in November of 2021 under a traditional rate case, prior to having the legislation for a WISP passed. And then we decided that it would be much more beneficial for us and the ratepayers to defer that filing and utilize and incorporate the WISP. So we had already pushed it back beyond where we were anticipating. If you look at where our ROE was at December 31st, 2021, I think it was at 7, I have it referenced, but it's like 7.8 after adjusting for goodwill. We were already under earning significantly at that time. So we had already deferred it quite a bit.
All right. You said in response, I believe, to a question from Commissioner Clodfelter that Lawson is not supported. Could you explain what you meant by that?
I'd ask if you could ask that question of Ms. Kellett on the joint rebuttal testimony from Aqua. She'd be able to answer that much more adeptly than I would.
You did make that statement, though, didn't you?
I did.
Okay. Do you know whether the company has retired its Lawson capital costs?
I do not believe we have. That's another question that could be further elaborated by Mr. Packer. We use group depreciation, and that's how group depreciation works is you don't remove it, it gets retired, and that's just the regulatory compact that we utilize. And it's common through all of our states, group depreciation.
All right. I don't have any further questions, but I want to give my colleagues an opportunity. I don't see any more, so thank you.
All right, questions or commissioners' questions?
Yes, just a couple. Thank you. Mr. Becker, I want to ask you some questions based upon Chair Mitchell's questions and Commissioner Clodfelter's questions concerning the performance, the metrics, penalties, incentives, et cetera. So just to recap, the company has proposed metrics, correct?
We have, yes,
You have not proposed at this time penalties and incentives, correct?
that's correct.
Do you have before you a copy of Commission Rule R117A, which is the procedure for water and sewer investment plan rate adjustments?
I do. I'm just going to find it. I do.
Could I ask you to look at R117A, B1, please? The provision begins with performance-based metrics.
I'm sorry, R117A,
Yes, then
B1.
little a, I'm sorry, I think I put too many A's in there. R117A, B1.
Present charges.
Nope. Paragraphs I'm looking at begins with performance-based metrics. It's the first paragraph under B.
I'm sorry, I was on the front page. R117A, under definitions, which is B,
B, right.
paragraph 1, performance-based metrics.
That's right. That's right. Sorry, I misled you in the beginning. Would you look at the last two sentences of that paragraph, please? And I'm going to ask you to read those two sentences into the record, if you would, and then I have a question.
The commission may approve penalties or incentives based on the results of approved metrics. Some metrics may be tracking metrics with or without targets or benchmarks to measure utility achievement.
And so, according to the rule, the commission may approve penalties or incentives, which indicates a discretionary option. Is that how you read it?
That is, and that's why we did not recommend penalties or incentives in this case.
Okay. I have no more questions. Thank you.
All right, are there motions you wish to make? Ms. Sanford?
I would like to move Mr. Becker's exhibits into the record, please.
All right, there being no objection, his 5 exhibits are received into evidence.
And I would like to move Becker Public Staff Direct Cross Exhibits 1 and 2 into the records.
All right, that motion likewise is allowed. And cross exhibits 1 and 2 are received. Mr. Becker, I believe you can step down for now.
Thank
Don't
you.
go far.
Thank you.
Ms. Sanford, call your next witness whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Aqua calls Dave Haddad to the stand, please.
Mr. Haddad, would you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right? Do you sincerely and solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
All right, Ms. Sanford.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Haddad. How are you?
Good.
Would you please state your name, business address, and occupation for the record, please?
Yes, my name is David Haddad. I'm a consultant. My address is 112 Forest Valley Court, Nashville, Tennessee, 37209.
Thank you. Did you cause to have filed on June the 30th, 18 pages of direct testimony, including 6 exhibits, some of which have subparts?
I did.
Do you have any corrections to make to your testimony?
I do.
Okay.
On page 12, lines 14 and 15.
And I'll take a moment here to test my assumption that these corrections are in the folders that everybody has, that Mr. Haddad's are. Okay, with that, he will not read them into the record if that's okay. We'll rely on the correction that we have passed out. Do you have any other changes to make to your testimony?
I do not.
And if you gave this testimony from the stand today, would it be as it's presented in your direct testimony in the corrections?
Yes.
The witness is available for cross. Oh, no, I'm sorry, he's not. Did you prepare a summary?
I did, yes.
And is it your understanding that that summary has been distributed to the public staff and to the commission today?
That is my understanding.
Do you have any corrections to make to your summary?
I do not.
So if it was given orally from the stand today, it would be as we have drafted and distributed it in the hearing room. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes, I would note that the correction identified would be also made to that summary.
To the summary, the correction you identified
Perfectly
previously.
correct. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. So, Madam Chair, I ask that Mr. Haddad's testimony be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand and that his exhibits be marked for identification.
There being no objection, that motion is allowed, and it includes the correction sheet.
Thank you. Mr. Haddad is available for cross.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, if you could first turn to page 5 of your direct testimony. And on that page, beginning at line 8, you state that the company proposes no modifications to the fixed / variable ratio from that proposed by the public staff and approved by the commission in the company's last rate case, which docket number W-218 sub 526. Is that correct?
Yes.
Would you agree that in the sub 526 rate case, the public staff actually recommended water rates with a 30% base facility charge and a 70% volumetric charge rate design for all the Aqua NC water customers, all the Brookwood water customers, and all the Fairway water customers?
I'll defer that to witness Franceschi.
Now, with respect to the table on page 6 of your testimony, do you agree that the 80% fixed base facility charge there does not include flat rate sewer customers?
Yeah, and I'm going to defer that to witness Franceschi.
All right. If you could turn to page 9. And starting at line 7, you discuss sewer customers in the Huntley Glen, Park South, and Parkway Crossing subdivisions, which, as you state, Aqua effectively passes through the city's usage rate to these meter sewer customers by replacing Aqua's volumetric usage rate with the city's for customer billing purposes. Is that correct?
Yes, and I would defer to witness Franceschi.
All right. These last few questions I've asked that you've deferred, do you contend that do you agree that your testimony, your direct testimony is correct on those issues?
I agree that my testimony is correct. He's doing rebuttal and has clarifications to this.
Okay. All right, let's try page 12, lines 13 through 17.
Okay.
So there you propose that the pilot be continued until Aqua's next rate case. However, I believe this is the subject of a correction. Is that right?
Yes.
So it appears that as corrected, you are requesting that the pilot be continued through the 2023 irrigation season. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Did the company make any revisions to its rate design to account for that change?
I'm not aware that any changes were made.
All right. So the data that the company has collected thus far from the pilot program, is there any from the second full irrigation season that's available to analyze?
Yes, that season would have concluded in September of last year. However, at the time of the filing, which was June, that season was not concluded. And the correction to my testimony is to give a 3-year period of data, 3 full irrigation seasons for an evaluation.
Okay, so just to be clear, the company's filed and proposed pilot rates through 2025, but your testimony now states that it should only continue through 2023.
That we would,
The 2023 irrigation season, I'm sorry.
yes, that would be the period for evaluation of any rate design changes.
Okay. Getting back to the data from the second full irrigation season, to your knowledge, has the company filed that data with the commission or provided it to the public staff?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And do you know whether the company's performed any analysis on that data?
I do not know.
All right. Let's turn to page 13. And there you state in the first year under tiered rates, the usage revenue was higher.
Mm-hmm.
Was that due to increased average usage?
Yes, so the 2021 data, was hard to expect or understand exactly what the customers would do in the first year with the tiered rates. But because of higher usage in that year, we obviously had the revenues that had to be flowed back to customers.
All right. And the revenue reconciliation component of the pilot, is that similar to that in the CAM or the consumption adjustment mechanism?
I don't know.
All right. Is that a better question for Mr. Franceschi?
Yes.
Okay, and on page 16 of your testimony, you describe who the CAM would apply to. Is that correct?
Can you give a line reference, please?
Sure. So starting at, the question is on line 5.
Okay.
So do you agree that at that point in your testimony, you describe who the CAM would
Yes,
apply
I
to?
do.
All right, and can you explain why Aqua didn't apply the CAM to metered sewer customers?
I cannot.
All right, those are all my questions.
Mr. Freeman, I saw you make a move. Do you have questions?
We're all finished, thank you.
All right, redirect.
No questions.
All right, questions by the commission. All right. Commissioner Duffley?
So on page 13, good afternoon, first of all.
Good afternoon.
On page 13, public staff was asking about the tiered customer usage revenue.
Mhm.
Do we know what 2022 looks like? Is the tier customer usage revenue higher again in 2022?
I do not have that answer, but I would suggest that Mr. Franceschi may have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Haddad, do you have recollection that after the commission's order changing the design there with regard to Huntley Glen, Park South, and Parkway Crossing in the Charlotte area, that numerous complaints were received after that time, and that is what has resulted in the company's proposal to eliminate these 3 systems from the pass-through sewer rate. You,
I do not have a recollection. I was not involved in that proceeding.
all right. So are you aware whether any other customers complained
I am not,
subsequent to that proceeding?
sorry. I am not aware.
All right. And then the company disagrees with the public staff's removal of the compound annual growth rate for certain expenses that Aqua projected into the base year that ends December 31, 2022. And now that those expenses are known, could Aqua provide the invoices for the actual amounts? Are you able to answer?
I'll defer that to witness Gerhart.
All right. Questions on commission's questions, public staff,
No question.
company?
No questions.
All right. I'll entertain motions.
Let's see. I will move Mr. Haddad's exhibits into the record, please.
All right, there being no objection, his 6 exhibits will be received into the record, and of course, they are marked as they were when pre-filed. All right, Mr. Haddad, you may step down.
Thank you.
Ms. Sanford, was he to be excused?
Well, he has rebuttal. He's on a
Okay,
rebuttal panel
right,
with
there
Mr.
we go.
Gerhart.
All
But
right.
just excuse for
Nope,
the stand
so-
for now.
So, again, as I told Mr. Becker, don't go too far.
That's right. Thank you.
Ms. Sanford, you may call your next witness.
Okay, thank you. We'll call Dan Franceschi, please.
Mr. Franceschi, if you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. There it is. Do you sincerely and solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Ms. Sanford.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Franceschi. Would you state your name, business address, and occupation for the record, please?
Yes, Daniel T. Franceschi, 30 Glen Circle, Erdenheim, Pennsylvania. And I'm an independent contractor performing billing analysis and rate design work.
Thank you. Did you cause to be filed in this docket on December 19th rebuttal testimony consisting of 11 pages?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any corrections?
Yes, just one.
Let's see. I think your correction was the subject of one of the documents that we distributed earlier today. Would you tell us the page and line numbers?
Page 6, lines 14 through 18.
Thank you. Do you have any other corrections to your testimony?
No, I don't.
Did you prepare a summary to be filed in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Have any changes to make to your summary?
No.
So if you were to give your rebuttal testimony and your summary today orally from the stand, would it be as those you have filed, subject to the corrections you have made?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Madam Chair, I ask that Mr. Franceschi's rebuttal testimony and his summary be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand.
There being no objection, that motion will be allowed, and Mr. Franceschi's rebuttal testimony and summary will be received and treated as if given orally from the witness stand.
Thank you. Mr. Franceschi is available for cross.
Good afternoon, Mr. Franceschi. If you could please first turn to page 2 of your rebuttal testimony. And there and on page 3, would you agree that you disagree that Darden Table 1 in the testimony of public staff witness Lindsay Darden shows present and proposed service revenues by division?
I disagree with the title on the table. It says that it shows public staff's revenues, but it actually shows Aqua's revenues as filed. Aqua's proposed revenues as filed. It's just a title that's wrong.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. On page 6 of your rebuttal testimony, you represent that Aqua's existing and proposed rate design is intended to be an 80-20 ratio for uniform sewer and fairway sewer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the same ratio that was approved in the last case.
All right. And in your testimony, when you're referring to rate design and the ratio of fixed to variable, are you referring to service revenues or are you referring to the average residential metered bill for each rate division?
Total service revenues.
And do you agree that there's a difference between the two?
Yes.
All right. On page 7, you go on to discuss the ratio of rate design and compare it to the short-term fixed expenses as determined by the EFC as part of the sub 497 rate case, correct?
Yes.
And your testimony starting on page 7 at line 17 states that the ratios of 40-60 and 80-20 are already designed to move more of the revenue requirement to the variable side than would be warranted by the cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. If the costs are in the mid-80s, then an 80-20 would be less than would be warranted by the cost.
And is that something that's prohibited by any North Carolina statute or commission rule?
No, not at all.
All right. Is the 80-20 ratio that you described representative of the actual service revenues that the company collects?
Based on the numbers that you just quoted from the last rate case is the only data I have on that. I don't have, if you're asking me, is it based on the revenue that they collect right now or in the test year? I do not have that.
All right. Would you agree that for Aqua's uniform sewer rate division, the sewer revenues collected by the company, more than 87%, are actually captured in either the flat and base facilities charges, which are the fixed portions of the revenues?
Yes, here's where it comes to be a difference in the definition that you pointed out immediately a minute ago. When the commission voted on 80/20, they were talking about the conversion of the flat rate customers from the past to meter, which took place in November of 2020. And they applied the 80/20 rule to those customers only, not to the fixed, not to the total revenues, including the fixed. So when you put in the fixed in there, it's going to be a higher number.
All right. On page 8 of your testimony, you describe Aqua sewer customers who receive purchased sewer treatment from Charlotte Water. Is that correct?
Yes,
All right. And you suggest that those customers should be merged into the uniform rate class. Is that correct?
yes.
And on page, I'm sorry, starting on line 10 of page 8, your testimony states that moving these customers to uniform sewer would be consistent with the current practice used for other uniform sewer customers for which Aqua pays other providers for sewer treatment on a volumetric basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Now you've been handed what is marked Franceschi, or you're about to be handed, and it's also in that giant binder, but I thought this would be easier. What has been pre-marked, public staff proposed Franceschi rebuttal cross exhibit 1. I'm going to take a brief pause so that everybody can get to that page.
Madam Chair, which
Is there, if there's a Franceschi tab? it's
There's a
behind-
Franceschi
Franceschi.
tab.
Rather.
It was right behind the Becker tab. So it's early.
All right. Okay.
Hold on, Ms. Yost, let's get this document identified as Franceschi rebuttal. Public staff cross-examination exhibit 1.
Now, do you agree that that exhibit is the company's response to the public staff's data request number 117, question 1?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you agree that in response to a request for a list of other systems for which Aqua pays a third-party provider for sewer treatment on a volumetric basis, and Aqua's customers in the sewer system, or in the system rather, are charged uniform rates, the company identified the Flowers Plantation system?
I believe that's, it was News Colony. I have it, and I'm reading it, it says News Colony.
Would you agree, subject to check, that those are one and the same?
Subject to check, yes.
All right. Are you aware that that system receives sewer treatment from both the News Colony wastewater treatment plant owned and operated by Aqua and bulk sewer treatment from Johnston County on a purchased sewer basis?
Yes.
All right. And now, beginning on page 9 of your testimony, you respond to the public staff's recommendation that the conservation pilot program be discontinued. Is that correct?
Excuse me, I was still on the Charlotte Water. Where are you now?
You know what? I'm going to strike that question because I believe I covered this with Mr. Haddad. All right. So, Mr. Haddad, referred a few questions that I asked of him to you, so I'm going to try to follow up on those at this point. Would you agree, subject to check, that in the sub 526 rate case, the public staff actually recommended water rates with a 30% base facility charge and a 70% volumetric charge rate design for all of the Aqua North Carolina customers, all of the Brookwood water customers, and all of the Fairways water customers?
That sounds familiar. I'd have to check, but I believe that's what happened.
All right. Let's see. If the next question did refer to Mr. Franceschi's testimony, but you don't happen to have a copy of that in front of you, do you?
What is the question?
So there was a table on page 6 of his testimony.
Who's testimony?
Mr. Haddad's testimony?
Yes.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay. So do you agree that the 80% appearing on that table does not include flat rate sewer customers?
Yes, as I explained a few minutes ago.
Okay. And perhaps you answered this, bear with me. If the fixed portion included base facilities charges and flat rate charges, then would it be a higher percentage than the
Yes.
company's sewer revenues?
I already answered that one.
I'm sorry. All right. I think the final question, this was regarding the revenue reconciliation component of the pilot. And would you agree that that's similar to the revenue reconciliation in the consumption adjustment mechanism?
I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't disagree.
Okay.
I know what the revenue reconciliation in the pilot program was agreed upon by the commission in the case that established it. And it had a situation where if Aqua over-earned, they would refund in a one-time payment, but if they under-earned, they'd recover the under-earnings in payments over a year's period, approximately, could be 9 months to a year. I do not know the details of the present CAM proposals, so I don't know if it was set up the same way.
Okay. All right. Those are all of my questions for Mr. Franceschi.
Redirect.
No questions, thank you.
All right, Mr. Franceschi, the commission has a few questions. After the 526 rate order from the commission, which approved a rate design change for the metered customers to move from a flat rate, for metered customers to move from a flat rate to rates based on an 80/20, 80 for the base, 20 volumetric rate design. How many customers, or approximately, were moved off the flat sewer rate as a result of that change?
I'll have to look that up, see if I have it. Sorry, I don't have that number exactly. I believe it was around 2,900. It could have been higher. I can get it for you in a
No, I think that's good. I was just asking approximately, so you've given me your best number. And so, do you have an idea of how many customers remain on a still charged a flat sewer rate?
$91,000 bills a year. If someone has a calculator, divide that by 12. Aqua, AMC, and 2,000 in fairways. Help me with that?
All right, and that would be the number that's still on the flat sewer rate.
That's the number of bills annually. Divide by 12 to get the number of customers.
All right. And but again, that's not the total bills. I'm looking for the flat, the number on the flat. That's what that calculation would give me, that math would give me. All right, and then how many purchased sewer systems does Aqua have?
We purchase water from Charlotte.
And this is for purchased sewer.
We purchase sewer, from Charlotte Water, gets confusing there, to serve the systems at Park South, Parkway Crossing, and Huntley Glen. So there'd be 3 systems if you count it that way. And we also purchased sewer treatment from Johnston County to serve the excess flow from Neuse River that was mentioned before.
All right, and so do any of those, none of those then still receive the flat rate, or do they? Flat rate charge?
No, they're measured.
Okay. As I tried to ask Mr. Haddad earlier, after the switch, after the customers were switched to the base volumetric rate design of 80/20, there were numerous billing complaints, and I understand that is the reason why the company has now proposed to consolidate those customers into the uniform sewer rate division and eliminate the pass-through sewer rate from Charlotte Water. Do you recall that, and is that your understanding of why this proposal is being made?
Yes, that's true. What happened was before the conversion, the people who were measured, that is not flat rate, were only in those 3 systems I was referring to. And they paid a combination of an average bill of approximately 86% lower than, no, I'm sorry, not lower, 86% of the bill throughout ANC. When the rate design was submitted, we were assuming a 60/40, or at least staff was, and calculations were made, but the ruling came down 80/20. Now, this may be a little confusing, but because of that change, an inadvertent consequence was that these people, the 1,000 customers in these 3 systems, ended up paying bills 115% or 15% higher than ANC. They had been paying approximately 15% lower. Now they're paying 50% higher because of that. So the impetus to try to correct this was to suggest that they be put into the ANC uniform rate and brought down into a rate that was consistent with the rest of ANC. Staff's proposal that is filed with their testimony also doesn't take into consideration this inadvertent consequence of the fact that they give a base facility charge, which is uniform across ANC, including those customers. But if they continue to be billed with only $6.45 a month, the pass-through, they'll end up paying 75%. In staff's proposal, they'd end up paying 75% of ANC, which, remember, 2 years ago, they were at 86%. Last 2 years, they've been at 115, and now staff would put them at 75. So my testimony was that the simplest way to solve this is to treat those 1,000 customers was purchase sewer, put into the O&M expenses, and have them pay uniform rates, the same as the people in Neuse River who get it from Johnston County, which we do not pass through. We put into O&M expenses.
All right, thank you for that explanation. And then the company disagrees with the public staff's removal of that compound annual growth rate for certain expenses that have been projected into the base year that ends December 31st, 2022. Now that those expenses are known, because that's behind us, can Aqua provide invoices for those actual expense amounts?
I couldn't answer that. I'm building analysis and rate design. Another witness could.
Do you know who might answer that?
Mr. Gerhardt, perhaps?
All right, thank you for that. All right, questions from the commission for Mr. Francis? Yes. Commissioner Heath?
Yeah, I just want to clarify and make sure I'm understanding it. And it might be a late file exhibit need, but the number in the entire Aqua customer population, did I understand that the number, well, on the sewers, wastewater side, the number of customers that receive a flat rate bill is, did you say 9,100 plus 2,000 and divide that number by 12?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be my math. I'd be under 1,000 or under 1,000 customers.
It's a small number.
Okay, and everyone else now is metered.
That's correct. The majority are metered. Give you a number if you want to. Again, I have annual numbers here, so to do a quick division. $108,000 in ANC. And 35,000 in, that's 36,000 in fairways. So if you divide those totals by 12, anybody have a calculator?
Okay, so that's considerably, I think that's considerably different than what you stated a few minutes ago.
I'm talking about the ones that were converted.
Oh, converted. Okay, sorry. Okay, what do you happen to know what system those are in, the remaining flat billed sewer?
No, I don't have that information here. In my data back at the office, I know the
Okay.
system.
Well, if that would be okay for a late filed exhibit, just to give us a list of the current flat fee sewer customers, what system?
Yeah, typically they're in systems that we do not provide water for, so we don't have water meters, we don't have readings.
I understand that. If you do know where they get their water on that table without too much extra work, I'd love to see that too. But if you don't know that, at minimum, just the number,
Okay.
and then the system that they're associated with.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, questions on the commission's questions?
Just one. So I know you have Mr. Haddad's testimony there. On page 6, does it show that 58% of ANC sewer customers are metered customers?
Page 8?
Page 6.
I believe it was page 6,
6.
the table.
Yes, you notice the majority of Fairways customers, 94% were converted from flat rate to metered. And a little more than half of the ANC customers were converted. The other ones couldn't be converted because we don't have the meters.
And so that would in turn mean that approximately 42% are flat rate, correct?
Yes.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Sanford.
We have no questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Franceschi, we were successful in getting you out,
Yes.
and you may be excused. At this time, we will take a break, and let's try to be back at 4:15.
Thank you.
started a couple of announcements so that everyone will know. Number one, should we finish with this witness? Should we finish with this witness? That'll be the last witness for today. So if anybody's concerned or worried about that. Number two, tomorrow's start time will be 1:00 p.m. And in the event that Commissioner McKissick has some unavoidable conflicts with the timing, and it's possible that he might not be able to be here tomorrow, and I want to inquire on the record whether any party has any objection to his being able to read on as well as watch these proceedings on YouTube
We have no objection.
and continuing to participate in the case.
The public staff doesn't object.
All right. And now, Ms. Sanford, you may call your next witness.
Aqua, North Carolina calls Dean Earhart to the stand.
Sorry, Mr. Drews, I made an assumption.
I'm already ahead of the curve because I didn't say Carolina Water.
Mr. Gerhardt,
She'll get her revenge.
Ms. Gerhardt, if you would place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you sincerely and solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
All right. Mr. Drews.
Mr. Gerhart, did you cause to be filed on June 30th, 2022, 27 pages of direct testimony along with an Exhibit 1 and 1A?
I did.
Do you have any corrections to that direct testimony?
I do not.
And have you prepared a written summary of your direct testimony?
I have, yes.
Do you have any changes to that?
No.
At this time, we would like to ask that the direct testimony of Mr. Gerhart and his summary be incorporated into the record as if orally read from the stand, and that his exhibits be marked as identified. Identified as marked?
There being no objection, both motions are allowed.
And we have waived reading the summary out loud, so Mr. Gerhart is available for cross-examination.
All right.
Public staff does not have any questions for Mr. Gerhart.
All right. Are there questions from the commission? Chair Mitchell? No? You're a lucky day, Mr. Gerhart. All right, entertain a motion.
We would ask that his exhibits be admitted into evidence.
That motion is, you say exhibits? I have one. Do you have more?
I believe there's a 1 and a 1A that are pre-filed.
All right. That motion is allowed, and Mr. Gerhardt's essentially 2 exhibits will be received into evidence at this time. Yeah. Hold on, I was about to let you off the hook.
Problem?
All right. A little bit out of order, but bear with me. The question that I've been asking, I tried twice now. Let's see if 3 times is the charm. The company has disagreed with the public staff's removal of the compound annual growth rate for certain expenses that Aqua projected into the base year. Now that those expenses are known, can Aqua provide invoices of the actual expense amounts?
2022 expenses would be available. We do a quarterly reporting right now as part of our WIS-SIG program. December isn't completely final as we sit here today, but it will be final by the time the reports are due, which will be February 15th. But I think that answers your question.
All right, so would you be willing to provide those invoices as a late filed exhibit?
as I said, we do our quarterly financials. I guess I need to know exactly, when we say invoices, there's a large volume of invoices for a year. But obviously, we'd be able to work with the commission to provide,
And work with the public staff to the extent that their objection is concern. You will recognize it by the ones that they disallow and pulled out the projected amount. Those are the ones that we're looking for the invoices to support the expenses. The expenses no longer need to be projected if you have the invoice.
correct. And as I said, although the year isn't final as of today, I mean, we will have the information within the immediate future, and we should be able to provide the updates as are being requested.
Could I ask a clarification on the late filed exhibit?
Yes.
So we anticipated providing an update of the actual expenses through 2022. And the question is whether in addition you want all the invoices behind them.
Yes, if they're available, and he can provide them as support, and we can have them admitted.
That is a huge volume. We will do it if you want it, but I don't know how the public staff feels about that, but it's a lot.
All right, well,
If I could give a little scale to the, to the,
And I might add, that's the kind of thing normally we would look for maybe sampling of rather than the full volume.
all right.
Mr. Gearhart might be able to give you an idea of how many.
to give you an idea, the 2021 test year, the expense side was approximately 100,000 lines in the GL. So those aren't all invoices, but we'd be talking a significant amount of paper.
Would these not be invoices that normally would be provided to the public staff for their review?
Generally, we don't provide all of the invoices unless it's a very specific inquiry regarding a specific expense. In our rebuttal, there was one item where we provided invoices because we felt it was justified, but there was one thing out of obviously all the rebuttal testimony.
All right, how about this, that you'll provide the updates through the end of the year with the actual expenses, that the invoices will be provided to the public staff should they request them between now and the time that they are available to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now, are there questions on this commissioner's questions?
I don't believe so, no.
Any from the company?
No, I will add, though, that this witness could answer a question that came up with an earlier witness that was deferred to someone else related to the consumption during the conservation pilot tiered first year. I don't know if you want to raise that now or not, but I'd hate to pass on an opportunity to actually provide information that was asked.
All right, we appreciate that, Mr. Drews. I believe that's Commissioner Duffley. She's looking. Did anyone else have? All right.
Good afternoon. So it's my understanding that you might have some information about what the tier customer usage looks like for 2022.
That is correct. We actually just got our data, the final data for the year this week. If you recall, well, the history is in the first year, which was 2021, the customers in those four systems wound up using 1.1% higher volume than what was in the rate design. As far as the reasons for that, it was a new pilot, it was a new tiered rate. They probably didn't see the impacts until summer. Didn't really have the impact that I guess we'd expected, and there was a sizable refund that we issued earlier this year. The numbers this year for 2022 show decrease. And again, I don't have the schedule. I just know the numbers because I just did them recently. And this was going to be part of the a Q1 report that we're going to be doing. The numbers this year are actually down 3.8% versus 2021, which is 2.7% below the baseline established in our last rate order. So we've gone from round numbers, about $100,000 refund that we gave last year to roughly a $70,000 shortfall, which per the agreement would be a surcharge to be collected throughout 2023. So we just got those numbers this week. So when I heard it, I figured I could help with that.
Thank you for that information.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yeah, I know. I think that consumption change seems material. But what we have now for the test year and base year doesn't include that kind of drop, does it, moving forward?
The test year itself wouldn't. I know we provided updated data through August, so theoretically some of the updated information would have it. But the test year itself included the higher number.
Okay, so through August, so it could be, okay.
Yeah, you'd start to see it in June and July and August.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Are there any questions on commission's questions?
No.
Any?
None from us.
So just one last clarification on the late filed exhibits. We're going to get the late filed actual updated expenses through the end of 2022. And also, if you don't get specific requests from the public staff, I would just ask that you provide the public staff a reasonable sample so they could sample the invoices.
Thank you. We have that. We will do that.
All right, Mr. Gerhart, you can't blame us for not giving you the complete pass on that since your counsel kind of exposed you.
No, I volunteered. When the question came up, I immediately told them that I had the answers that you guys were looking for, so.
All right, well, as I told the other witnesses, don't go too far, but you may step down. Any other business to take up today?
I have one matter, housekeeping matter. I failed before the break to move Mr. Franceschi's rebuttal public staff cross exhibit 1 into the record. I'd like to do so now.
That motion without objection will be allowed.
Thank you.
Public staff's cross exhibit from Mr. Franceschi's testimony will be received into evidence at this time. All right, nothing else for today? You got at least an extra 30 minutes here, so that's my gift to you. We'll be adjourned for today. Return tomorrow, 1 o'clock.